Hi, everybody, and welcome to Lovefraud Live. Suppose something happens, perhaps even something small, and your partner explodes. He or she launches into a tirade, slams doors, throws things, and appears to be on the edge of physical violence. What do you do? I'm Donna Andersen, author of Lovefraud.com, and tonight I'm going to talk about narcissistic rage and what to do if you encounter it. This is a live streaming show, and I'll answer your questions at the end of this presentation. So please send them to me as we go along. Narcissistic rage is really scary. The rager may yell, scream, curse, demean, belittle, shake fists, and back you into a corner, and that's assuming that the person doesn't get violent. If the situation escalates, the rager may throw or break items, punch the wall, possibly right next to your head, and threaten you. Sometimes they lose control and may totally physically strike you. Usually, the display of aggression is way out of proportion to whatever it was that supposedly triggered the anger. Narcissistic rage is not an anger problem. Its purpose is to dominate and control you. If your partner is exhibiting narcissistic rage, it probably means that he or she has a serious personality disorder, such as antisocial, narcissistic, or psychopathic personality disorder. Here are 5 warning signs of narcissistic rage. Number 1, your partner's bad behavior goes beyond anger. So let's look at your relationship in general. Do you find that even when your partner isn't raging, he or she is mean to you? Does your partner criticize you and treat you with contempt? If you have a disagreement, does he or she refuse to work together to resolve it? Instead, does your partner engage in stonewalling or the silent treatment? These are all signs of relationship abuse. Narcissistic rage doesn't occur in a vacuum. It occurs in the context of an abusive relationship. Here's number 2. Their eyes appear to turn black. It looks like something out of a horror movie. Your partner's eyes may usually be beautiful blue or soft brown, but in a rage, they appear to turn black. Now, there's actually a physiological reason for this. Anger activates the sympathetic nervous system. This is the part of the autonomic nervous system from the primitive caveman part of the brain that creates the fight or flight response. It triggers rapid breathing, increased heart rate and blood pressure, more adrenaline in the bloodstream, and the dilation of the pupils, which are the black parts of the eye. The dilated pupils make the eyes seem black. They indicate that your partner's brain perceives a threat and is preparing to respond with aggression. You don't want to be the object of possible aggression. Here's warning number 3. As your partner gets angrier, he gets calmer. Now, some abusers and batterers don't get worked up in fight or flight situations. They become more calm and controlled. A psychologist by the name of Neil S. Jacobson found that this applies to about 20% of psychopathic men, and he called them vagal reactors. The term vagal refers to the vagus nerve, which links the brain with the heart, lungs, upper digestive tract, and other organs of the chest and abdomen. As batterers, these men actively control their level of arousal so that they can engage in intentional violence with maximum effect. So if your partner turns to ice when he's angry, Know that you may be in a dangerous situation. Here's number 4. Your partner enjoys making you upset. So suppose you're having a heated argument with your partner. You've endured false accusations, outrageous criticism, and vicious name-calling. You can't take it anymore and finally concede defeat. What does your partner do? Smiles or smirks. Shocked, you realize that he or she enjoyed making you upset and took pleasure in grinding you into the dirt. This means that your partner is more interested in power and control than in a mutually supportive relationship. Finally, number 5, after the rage, your partner acts as if nothing ever happened. So maybe you've had a knockdown, drag-out fight, and your partner has stormed out of the house. A few hours later, you're still shaking and crying, and your partner returns and asks, "What's for dinner?" Or your argument over the phone or by text ended in a breakup. You haven't heard from your partner in days or weeks, and then suddenly you get a text. "Hey, what's up?" You kidding me? You can't believe it. Your partner is acting as if nothing even happened. This may be a sign that he or she has one of these disorders: antisocial, narcissistic, or psychopathic. All of these disorders are characterized by shallow emotions and a lack of empathy. That's why they can erupt in anger and then act like nothing ever happened. So, those are 5 warning signs of narcissistic rage. You don't have to see all of these warning signs. Any one of them is cause for concern. So, if you see narcissistic rage, what do you need to know? And what do you need to do? First of all, if your partner flies into a rage, know that he or she may not be far from physical violence. Therefore, do not react and do not provoke. Stay very calm and do whatever you can to de-escalate the situation. Speak softly, say soothing words, and if you can, figure out how to get out of the room or out of danger. Know that you may be in a precarious situation. Anyone who is capable of narcissistic rage may be a ticking time bomb that could explode at any time. Therefore, once the incident has passed, plan your escape. If you live together, it's best to leave when your partner is not at home. Now, of course, if the situation looks like it's going to turn into domestic violence right away, you may need to flee immediately. This is really important. Do not make excuses for your partner's behavior. Narcissistic rage is not normal. It is not an expression of some internal pain. No matter what your partner tells you, his or her behavior is not your fault. The goal of narcissistic rage is control and domination. That's what they want. So if your partner exhibits narcissistic rage, he or she probably has, as I said, antisocial, narcissistic, or psychopathic personality disorder. This is serious stuff. There are no proven treatments for these personality disorders. Anger management classes will not help. Let me repeat. Anger management classes will not help. Therapy won't help either. The outbursts may calm down a bit, but the potential is always there for another eruption, one that could possibly be worse. Your only real solution is to end your involvement with this person. Okay, let me see if we have some questions. Mind, Body, and Soul, welcome. 2 months of leaving him from emotional and physical abuse. You probably know exactly what I'm talking about. Michelle says this has happened to her. So Michelle says, you are correct. He choked me and is going to prison on April 21st. He did it because I wouldn't shut up and apologize to him. I'm very glad you got away from this person, and I certainly hope that you are away. That's a really important point that you brought up, because there's a lot of research that shows that a man who chokes a woman, that's often a first step towards serious domestic violence, including murder. Lots and lots of women who have been murdered by their partners were first choked by the person. So I probably should have included that with the warning signs. If a partner chokes you, that is really, really serious. So thank you very much, Michelle, for bringing that up. Wow. Maroka Walker says, I had an ex that would hit himself and then tell me, you're lucky it's not you. The other ex would hit the wall and walk back and forth with a gun in his hand. Well, I'm glad they're exes, because both of those are serious, serious warning signs of narcissistic rage. Yeah, I've heard of that, of the abuser actually hitting themselves, and sometimes they do that and then call the cops and try to make it sound like it's your fault and that you did it. And unfortunately, sometimes they're such good liars that the cops believe them. But all of this behavior is a serious warning sign, and if you see any of it, you really need to get out of these involvements. Mind, Body, and Soul says that the guy threatened to kill her. Always take that type of warning seriously. Always. It must be taken seriously. I mean, maybe they have a tiny shred of conscience in there and know that they could really do this. So if you ever hear someone who tells you that they're disordered or tells you that he or she could possibly hurt you, take it seriously and end the involvement. Yeah, we have a comment about domestic violence deaths have increased since COVID. Yes, and that's a really scary statistic. I don't know the numbers offhand, but I have heard from fairly early on that the domestic violence hotlines have been receiving a tremendous surge in calls because people were locked up, with these disordered partners. I hope people who have been in this situation were able to get out and end the involvement, because as you can see, it's not a good situation. Okay, so Mind, Body, and Soul has a question. How come after the first year physical abuse started and then he needed sex after that, and he'd act like nothing kind of happened, kind of like Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde? I actually had a similar experience, although it didn't involve physical violence, in that if I had a big argument with my ex, my sociopathic ex-husband, which I invariably lost because he was a much better debater than I was. And, once I gave up, it was a turn-on for him, and he wanted to have sex. And I think that's what it is. These people are interested in power and control. And when they realize, again, that they have established power and control over you, in some cases it's a sexual turn-on. So if he was physically violent with you, and then that's like a turn-on, and that's another scary sign. If someone likes to have sex after a big fight, then this is not healthy either, and there's definitely something wrong with the person. Okay, so Too Exclusive says, I pressed 10 charges and he's still trying to contact me. It's been a year since I've seen him. He's going to jail soon. Will he leave me alone? Unfortunately, we can't control what the other person does. Luckily, he'll be locked up, so I hope he's going to be in jail for quite a long time. But you need to take precautions. This person has already been violent with you. As I said, this violence is not about anger, it's about power and control. And the fact that he's losing power and control, that he's going to be away from you, or in jail, that's pretty infuriating, for someone like this. So for these reasons, you need to take precautions. You need to be very firm in not responding to anything. Even if he does continue to contact you, you do not respond. I would also suggest that you get a book. There's a great book called The Gift of Fear by Gavin de Becker, and he talks about how to use your intuition and instincts to protect yourself, especially from violence and in stalking situations, because this, if he's continuing to contact you, it could be stalking. You have to do what you have to do. Hopefully he'll leave you alone, but there's no guarantee of that. So therefore, you need to be prepared to protect yourself. And that means certainly no contact ever. Do not respond to anything. But if it is becoming a problem, you may want to advise law enforcement that this is going on. Sometimes law enforcement doesn't take it seriously enough, so you may need to advocate for yourself, but definitely take your own precautions, make up your own mind, be firm that you are not going to have contact with this person. Wow. So Mind, Body, and Soul says, I learned to de-escalate by letting him abuse me or he would freak out, but I went numb. I've heard of that before, and I'm really sorry that you had to go through that. But that's actually a protective reaction. Going numb in that situation, that's your animal instincts, so to speak, protecting you. Well, you're still here, so I guess it worked for you to get out of the situation, but I'm very sorry that you had to do that. If anybody else, learn from that experience. You got to get out of these situations before it gets really bad, because, they get on this trajectory and they may not turn around. So at the first indication of potential violence, or, that's what narcissistic rage. Narcissistic rage is an initial indication of potential violence. It doesn't always turn into violence, but you never know. So, when you start to see these incidents, and, sometimes the partner will apologize and say, I don't know what got into me, I'll never do it again. Do not believe it. If you see these kind of signs, you really need to get out of these involvements as soon as you can. Well, the chat moved, so now oh dear, Michelle. He still calls me from jail. He says he's old and will never do it again. I know you're doing a book on older sociopaths and I'll be buying it. Yes. Well, Michelle, if he's calling from jail, it has to be a collect call and you have to accept it. So, or I guess maybe someone else is paying his phone bill, but I would certainly not take the calls. That's one thing. What you want to do is go no contact with this person. So definitely do that. Wow, Suzanne. So your ex didn't choke me. He disappeared into a bar for 30 minutes and then came back and grabbed me by the neck in front of everybody and called me the C word. That's pretty bad. I think that would count as narcissistic rage also. So everything we've been talking about certainly applies. Sharon says, my ex stalked and threatened my life many times. After I escaped, he claims he wants vengeance. It's really unfortunate, but, you know, some of these people who are truly disordered really feel that way and feel entitled to it. So take it seriously. Definitely do whatever you can to protect yourself. We do have a webinar on Love Fraud Education, which is called Coping with Stalking. And it's presented by a woman who went through unbelievable stalking and finally got the guy locked up. But she has a lot of good advice in that particular webinar, so you might want to check it out. But, you know, you just got to do everything you can to protect yourself, because sometimes they're serious, or they could become serious. And so you really just need to take precautions. Okay, so Maroka says, he would go into a rage when he wanted money. The louder he got, the more money I gave him. Once the money was in his hand, he went back to normal. See you later, babe. Thanks. Power and control. I mean, that's what that is. It's power and control. So I hope that you're out of that situation, because, you know, they keep doing it as long as we allow them to do it. So it's always up to us. It's always up to us to cut it off and find ways to protect ourselves. So NJ says, my friend of 25 years started raging after I stopped lending money. She had been horribly abused as a child. I had put up with her temper over the years, but when she raged towards my kids, it was over. Well, I'm glad it's over. I'm glad you brought up that it was female, because yes, women can exhibit this behavior as well, and we should not be tolerating it. So, you know, even if this person was a friend for all these years, it sounds like she was taking advantage of you. So maybe this incident was a blessing in disguise, because it finally gave you the push to end the involvement. So I'm glad about that. Okay, so we got a question here. How can you tell a sociopath versus NPD, which is narcissistic personality disorder? If you've watched some of my other videos, you've probably heard this little spiel before, but at Love Fraud, I use the term sociopath as an umbrella term for all of these cluster B personality disorders, which are antisocial, narcissistic, borderline, histrionic personality disorders, plus psychopathy. The reason is because there's an awful lot of overlap among the disorders, and my purpose is education. So what I'm trying to do is to teach you that these people are out there, and to recognize the warning signs of a personality disorder. Now, from the point of view of the target, which is you and me, the precise diagnosis usually doesn't matter. And there's a lot of overlap. What these people all have in common is that they are exploiters. Even the folks with borderline personality disorder, which is different because, I mean, unfortunately, that disorder often is the result of either sexual abuse for young women or shame for boys. But even so, the people with that disorder tend to be manipulative and hot and cold, and have difficulty with their emotions and things like that. But anyway, I often don't bother trying to differentiate one disorder from the other. I mean, unless you're a therapist who's trying to help somebody, or you're testifying in court or get a diagnosis for court, it doesn't matter. It really doesn't matter. So when I use the term sociopath, I'm talking pretty much about people who have any one of these disorders. So yes, there are some differences between antisocial personality disorder and narcissistic personality disorder, but they're both bad news. I mean, you really do not want to be involved with either of these people who have either of these disorders. So it's kind of academic, which disorder they have, because neither one of them has any treatment. They're always going to take advantage of you. So it's just better to avoid them altogether. Okay, so Lou12340 says, the worst abuse is when the narc turns the children against the loving parent and the smear campaign with everyone you know, assisted by the narc's family and flying monkeys. Yeah, that's such a painful situation, and it does happen a fair amount. Even in a family situation, people with antisocial or narcissistic or psychopathic personality disorders, all they're really interested in is power and control. And that includes the kids, and that includes the spouse. And one of the ways that many of them will exert this power and control is through parental alienation, trying to get the kids to hate the other parent. They denigrate the other parent. They try and get the kids to be afraid of the other parent, try and put the other parent down. And, unfortunately, they can often be successful. So in those situations, what you can try to do is, just keep telling your kids that you love them. If this is happening to you, you weren't clear on that, but it could be. And it's hard. You try and stay and be the normal, the loving parent, knowing that the kids, when they're with the disordered parent, it's just like a really impossible situation. And often they're just trying to survive, and often they, treat the normal or healthy parent badly in order to survive when they have to spend time with the disordered parent. So yes, it's a very painful situation. There are some resources for people who are dealing with parental alienation, but it's definitely very, very painful. Okay, so how would you know if you have PTSD from a situation like this, or does time just heal? PTSD and complex PTSD, they're very similar. PTSD is usually thought to happen with a particularly horrific experience. It's often associated with war or a natural disaster where something really terrible happens, and then you have hypervigilance, you have a startle reflex, you're always on edge. It interferes with your sleep, interferes with your relationships. There's a lot of effects of PTSD. Complex PTSD is the type that occurs when you have multiple experiences of being abused or berated or whatever usually happens in an abusive relationship. It's not always just one dramatic thing, but it's all this stuff over time that causes complex PTSD. So, they're very similar. It's just kind of that the causes are different. You really should get some kind of therapy for this, whether it's we have a couple of webinars about it on education.lovefraud.com, or if you can find a therapist who truly understands it. What you're looking for is someone who specializes in trauma, because it doesn't necessarily go away by itself. You do need to make an effort to really deal with the situation. So if you feel that you may have this, get some therapy, get a diagnosis, and and really work on the treatment, because it may not go away by itself. And if you do seek therapy, be aware that approximately half of therapists really do not understand what goes on when someone is in a relationship with someone who has a personality disorder. I mean, that's what our research shows. So if you find that whatever therapist you engage doesn't seem to understand what you're talking about, or you don't feel that he or she is being supportive or really listening to you, then get rid of that person and find another therapist. It could take you some time to find someone that really is able to help you. But if you've been traumatized by these situations, I really think that you should seek out some kind of therapy. Okay, Greenfield says, is it common for the narc to project? Mine accuses me of being a narc and of parental alienation. Yeah. That's a typical narcissistic or antisocial strategy, is to accuse you of whatever they're doing. So yes, that happens all the time. And it's important not to take it in, because normal people, when we're accused of something, we'll go like, gosh, am I really doing that? Did I really convey that? And the answer is no. They're lying. They're making it up. They're projecting. They're saying that you're the one who's doing all these things when they are the ones, in fact, who are doing these things. So yes, that is common, and do not believe it. Do not take it in. Do not try and adjust your behavior according to these accusations, which are essentially nonsense. So, okay. Well, I thank everybody. Nice conversation today. I thank you for all your comments and good additions to the points that I was making. And we'll see you next week, next Tuesday at 8 o'clock for the next episode of Lovefraud Live. Thanks a lot, everybody. Good night.